Okay, good evening, ladies. So for our next topic, we're done with tornadoes. We will focus on floods and flash floods. Okay. Um, so I have here a short video about floods, their effects, but probably we will just skip this part because I will just upload this one. Or this is found in the presentation uploaded into your ARA links, so you can just check out the presentation and watch over the video. Okay. So what is flood? Hey, in Filipino this is baha, right? And flood is the abnormal rise of water level in rivers, coastal areas, plains, and highly urbanized centers. Okay. So flooding in general may cause inconvenience, especially flooding in urban areas, because it can affect the daily living of people uh, living in the community or urban community. The second one, it may cause damage to property or even loss of life due to drowning. And most floodings, especially flash floods, okay, um, the duration can only last for a few minutes, but some type of flooding, especially those type of flood induced by rainfall or typhoon, it can last for several days or even weeks. Okay, so in general, flooding can be a natural process if the area is typically a floodplain, okay, or it can be the result of human activity. So human activity can increase the risk of flooding, especially to communities that are near mountainous regions, and then those mountainous regions are heavily deforested. So the water from the rainfall itself will flow down, and without trees, it will cause flooding into the low-lying communities. So some areas are naturally susceptible to flooding because of their location, land configuration, and climatic setting. So one good example of this one is those who are found in valleys, okay, and valleys that are subjected to frequent rainfall. Okay, so this type of setting may increase the risk of flooding, or naturally they are susceptible to flooding. So what are the different types of floods? Okay, so type, extent, and cause of flooding vary from place to place. So again, based on the previous slide, so it depends on the location, land configuration, and climatic setting. So based on the topography of the area, is it low-lying or located in a high elevated place? So that will also determine the risk factor in flooding. And then distinguishing flood types is important to properly address the causes and to help in reducing the risks brought by this event. Okay, so if the disaster management agency has conduct awareness drive to the community about flooding, especially those communities susceptible to flooding, they can actually help in mitigating the probable effect of a flooding in the future. Okay. Next, so the different types of flooding, we have four major types, but it depends on the area, okay, and the geographic setting. What type of flood will affect the location? Okay, so number one, we have riverine, also known as fluvial. Okay, and next we have estuarine and coastal. The next one we have urban, and the last one we have catastrophic flooding. So let's explore the first one. We have riverine or riverine. Sorry. When water level in river increases and goes beyond the average water level or worse, further encroaches levees. So these are uh, protected areas of the river bank itself. The type of flooding is called a riverine. also known as fluvial flooding. So when the water level exceeds the riverbanks themselves, to because of extreme rainfall, okay, um, the river itself will overflow, okay, and then eventually it will cause flooding to communities living near the rivers or the river itself. Water levels rise slowly in larger rivers because of their wide catchment areas or large catchment areas, okay? While smaller rivers have their water levels rise rapidly due to their smaller width, okay, and their and smaller catchment areas, okay? So the main reason of a riverine flooding is due to rainfall, extreme cases of rainfall, particularly induced by typhoons or tropical storms. Okay? And other effects or causes may be man-made, okay, or human-induced. If the river is heavily silted, it will become shallower and it will lose the capability to drain water effectively or efficiently. So what will happen because of its shallow depth, water will easily overflow from the river itself. Okay? So siltation is a major problem in some of the rivers, especially here in the country. So siltation may be the result of waste being dumped into the river, okay? Solid waste, etc. Okay. So this is the main reason also. The volume of water input is too much for the river to drain and for the ground to absorb. So remember, um, as a water flows or as the water flows in the river itself, some of it may become part of the groundwater, okay, because the riverbed also it's made of soil particles or ground itself, and eventually what will happen if there is too much volume of water, the river may lose its capability to drain, okay, the over or too much volume of water, so eventually it will overflow and it will cause flooding around its banks. Okay, so that's an example of a riverine flooding. Next, we have coastal estuarine flooding. Seawater may encroach low-lying land area that is usually still above sea level, and most of the time, or most cases, are caused by storm surges. So during typhoons, okay, when a tropical storm is passing by the area, so especially if the storm reaches a typhoon category, it can cause the coastal areas to be threatened by powerful waves brought about by the winds of the tropical cyclones. So it may reach about 12 meters. It depends on the intensity of the tropical cyclone. So storm surges flooding may be far-reaching and damaging compared to tidal flooding. Okay? So tidal flooding is caused mainly by the occurrence of neap tides and spring tides. So basically these are caused by the um, normal rise and normal rise of sea level, okay, uh, during the day or during certain times in a day. So during high tide or low tide, it can cause, it depends on the elevation of the coastal areas. If it is low lying, it is prone to tidal flooding. Okay. So what are tides basically? It's the normal rise and descent of water high in a day, which is due to the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun towards the oceans of the earth. So there are two classifications. We have spring tides and neap tides. In the image given or shown in the presentation, a spring tide happens when the sun, moon, and earth are aligned during full and new moon. So especially if the moon and the sun are in one position. Okay, so the combined gravitational force of the moon and the sun may eventually uh, cause a bulge to the Earth's ocean. So this may cause a very high tide to coastal areas. And if the coastal areas are low lying, it can cause severe flooding. Neap tides are a much weaker type of tide because the moon is positioned perpendicular to the earth and the sun, so the gravitational pull of the sun is being cancelled by the moon itself. So there's no bulging of the ocean waters um, observed in a neap tide. Okay. Next, we have urban flooding. So usually occurs in highly populated areas, developed areas, cities found in valleys or floodplains. Most cases of urban flooding is caused by man-made activities. Okay, and this type of flooding always happens if there is a lack of proper drainage system within the city of, or if there's a drainage system, probably it is clogged or blocked by waste, okay, thrown to drainage systems. So this is the case observed in metropolitan areas in the country, especially in Metro Manila. So they have what we call esteros, okay, and most of these esteros, their function is to redirect flood waters away from the city or urban areas and directly to open ocean or to the sea itself. But the problem is most of these esteros or flood channels are clogged by waste. Okay, so a problem of drainage and waste management. So if those two factors were fixed, or we will be they will be addressed, um, the effect of flooding in the future will be lessened. Okay, so poor urban planning may also be a major cause of flooding in cities or urban areas. So if houses are positioned or are built near riverbanks, probably their waste um, may, or most of these communities, their waste may go to the river itself, okay, dumping to flood channels, etc., to esteros, until the estero itself will be clogged by waste. And when the floods waters will come, it the the estero will overflow, and then eventually it will cause urban flooding. Okay, so again, proper urban planning is a must in order to prevent the effect of um, to prevent or to mitigate the effect of urban flooding. Okay, next we have catastrophic flooding may result from ground failure or major infrastructure failure, and flooding that can be the result of an earthquake because of uh, buildup of sinkholes, okay, or the collapse of ground uh, structure, okay, underground, which may affect the flow of groundwater that may cause this groundwater to overflow and flooding the whole community or area. So those are the cases of catastrophic flooding. But in most cases, just like what happened to Cagayan, okay, the Angat Dam, although in Cagayan there's no report of dam breakage, but the uh, volume of water, okay, um, that was caused by Typhoon Ulysses and the previous typhoons, okay, last November, um, promptly gave the dam administration to release water, okay, but this water may, because of too much volume, led to the flooding of urban communities in Cagayan, okay? And eventually, even though the typhoon has passed, this type of flood persists for almost a week or more than a week. Okay, so that is an example of a catastrophic flooding. But in the case of a dam breakage, because the dam itself was destroyed, so the whole water of the dam may flow. Okay, um, and this one can cause severe flooding to the community even though there's an absence of rain, etc. Okay, so most of the time too much rain can cause a dam to collapse due to increasing pressure and volume of water. So this is during times when there's a typhoon or tropical cyclone, okay, passing by the community or passing within the area. Okay, next we have flash flood. Flash flood, a rapid, short-lived, and violent arrival of large volume of water caused by intense to torrential rainfall on land that is saturated or unable to absorb water. So flash flood also may happen to urban areas. So urban flash floods. Okay. If you will look at the highlighted phrase, land that is saturated or unable to absorb water. So this is evident in urban areas because urban areas are covered in concrete pavement. So concrete pavement, okay, they don't have the capability to absorb water. Okay, so most deadly type of flood, as it can happen without warning. Okay, and from the word itself, flash flood, it can happen quicker, and also it can subside at a much faster rate compared to normal flooding. Okay, so concrete pavements and other related structures may also contribute to the sudden increase of water level resulting to flash floods because they don't have the capability to absorb water. So the water itself will gather in the area, and then eventually, if the water has increased or has reached a critical level, it will cause flash flood, just like what you are seeing in the image. Okay, so what are the hazards brought about by this flood? Okay, or flood events: damage to infrastructure, property, and loss of life due to drowning. And then after effects of flooding also may increase of the risk of acquiring waterborne diseases such as leptospirosis or even dengue. Okay, in evacuation centers, um, typically waterborne diseases, we have cholera or diarrhea, etc. So uh, these diseases are born because of loss of potable water supply, because flooding, okay, it may contaminate water supplies, and eventually if drunk by the people, it can cause diseases. And then power loss, as the surge of flood water can topple down electrical poles, especially in flash floods. The force of the water rushing in from a high place may cause electrical post or cables to fall down, and it's also very dangerous, especially if the cable itself is still alive. So it's dangerous to swim to floodwaters because you have or you are risked in electrocution. Okay, so what are the mitigations? So usually in flood prone areas, first they will have assessment and mapping. What are the critical points in the community that can contribute to the increased flooding of the area? And then flood prediction. Okay, where will the floodwaters come in after a rain, etc., and where will it exit? What is the path of the flood, etc.? So those are being assessed in flood prediction models, flood forecasting and warning, flood control engineering measures. Okay, so the buildup of structures that can protect us from floods itself. So to identify high risk flood areas, researchers, they use topography, data from topographical data, rainfall data, okay, the amount of precipitation received by the area in a month, in a year, And then the dimensions, if there's a river within the community or near the community, those are also being assessed. And the whole geology of the location. What are the types of rocks, okay, found within the community? Do these rocks have the capability to absorb water faster than any other rock, etc.? So those are being assessed. So once assessed, they will build up precautionary measures. They will do information drive within the community to help the people counter the effects of flooding. So tools being utilized to help in identifying flood-prone areas are the GIS, Geology Information System, and flood simulation programs or models. So these flood simulation programs are being shown in information drives in order to help or to show the people the possible flow of floodwaters within the community, so that they can put evacuation centers in a safe place away the flood uh, from the floodwaters. So as you can see in the image, ladies, so in coastal areas, their mitigation or their practice is to elevate their houses. In low-lying areas that are near um, bodies of water, or even in coastal areas that are in threat of uh, storm surges or rainfall induced coastal flooding, etc., they build floodgates. So this will counter the effect of flooding within the community. Okay? And then by assessing the area, if the area is a floodplain, as much as possible, they will build the houses away from the floodplain itself within the community in order to lessen the damage that can be caused by the flooding in the future. Okay? So that's it for flooding. Flooding also is a secondary effect of what we have discussed of our previous topics, such as thunderstorms and typhoons, because these two types of hazards, they can also cause torrential rains, especially typhoons, that can persist for over uh, an hour, 2 to 3 hours for thunderstorms, and for typhoons it can persist for about a week. It depends on the typhoon itself, the intensity of the typhoon. In thunderstorms, most likely the type of flood that may be associated to them is flash flood, because um, thunderstorms, they do not last for a day, they only last for a few hours. Okay, and it depends on the moisture that they have absorbed, um, the intensity of the flash flood itself. Okay, so that's it, ladies. Thank you for listening. Our next topic will be on storm surges, and then declining, okay, um, hazard, which is El Nino and La Nina. Okay, and in all things, God may be glorified.